Hi, Assalamualaikum and good morning. I assume you watched this video in the morning. So Dr. Walid asked me to give a talking about Islam's in Indonesia, especially after Indonesian independence. So I believe that you have got informations or lecturings about Indonesia, about Islam's before Indonesian independence, maybe in the colonialization or Japanese occupations or before that. So before we start our meeting, let me introduce myself first. So my name is Mega Hidayati, and I am a lecturer at Universitas Muhammadiyah Yogyakarta. I lecturing in program of Islamic politics, and this is my email address. So if you have a questions after this discussion, this talking, and then you can contact me in this email address. So let's start with the map of Indonesians. And I think you saw this before, and then from previous lecturings, but let's just start with this because I want you to remind again the position of Indonesia in the world maps. So Indonesia is located between the Asian continent and Australia, positions between two oceans, the Indians and the Pacific. So Indonesia is archipelagic country and pluralistic country in terms of religions, cultures, and ethnicity. Let us just focus on religious discussions. So Indonesia is really pluralistic country in the terms of religions. So I put here the population census in 2010. So there are several results here. You can see that there is Islams and then Protestants, Catholics, Hinduisms, Buddhisms, and Confucianisms. From these tables, you can see that Islam is majority. Why it's only 6 religions? So in Indonesia, there is terms of acknowledged religions. So what is actually acknowledged religions? If you ask to the governments about these terms, then they will give you answers that these religions that are acknowledged by the governments, it means that they give facilitations to these religions, but the other religions, they can live in Indonesia, but they cannot get the facilities related to, for example, financial aid, or the other, for examples about schools and also university. So these terms actually bring many discussions about religious freedoms in Indonesia. So these terms, for several experts, is reasons that there is a discrimination in terms of religions in Indonesia. And if you look at the tables here, there's also the word lainnya. It means others in English. So others, there is 0.13% are the others religions. This is including indigenous religions in Indonesia. If you look at the acknowledged religions, these 6 religions are not from Indonesia. They are imported religion actually. So where is the indigenous? Where are the indigenous religions? So the indigenous religions actually still exist in Indonesia, but they are not included in the Ministry of Religious Affairs. They included in cultural departments or cultural ministry. So this is the differences between acknowledged religions and the other religions. Although you see the map before, so although Islam is majority in Indonesia, for example, the number is 87.18%. This is based on population census. And although Islam is majority in Indonesia, in some regions, actually Islam is minority. So not all of in the regions or province, they are majority. In many places, for example, in the east part of Indonesia, Christianity is majority. While in Bali province, Hinduism is majority. Therefore, if you remember the lectures before this meeting, before this lecturing, I think you know that why there is rejection from the east part of Indonesia figure about the foundation of Indonesia, that is mentions the obligation for Islamic followers and blah blah blah. So that's that rejection because of in the east part of Indonesia, the majority is Christianity. But before we more talking about Islam in Indonesia, I have to mention that actually Islam's and governments or politics in Indonesia is separated, cannot be separated. I mean, so before that, I want to give you pictures Indonesian governments. So before Indonesian independence, there is a Dutch colonizations and Japanese occupations. So in Dutch colonization, Muslims group they got discriminative actions from the colonizations. But in Japanese occupations, Japanese more give a good opportunity to Islams. So they make it Muslim as a friends rather than as enemy. Then you have discussed this before. So Indonesian independence is in August 17th, 1945. And then there is a government that we call as the old order. The president is Sukarno. It's from 1945 to 1966. Then we have the periods of the new orders. It's start from 1966, then until 1998. And then right now, until now, we are in the reform era. It starts from 1998 until now. So you can see that it's only a few presidents here in Indonesia. And then Islam is really related to this kind of dynamics in Indonesian governments. Now we start with the Islam in the old order. I can say that there was limited power at that times. So the President Sukarno offered the idea of Nasakom nationalism. Nasakom is abbreviation of nationalism, agama, and communism. That means nationalisms, religions, and communisms. So Sukarno observed that there are three groups in Indonesia at that times. There were three groups at that times that have power in a society. So he wants to manage these three groups to be united. But in implementation, we can say that in the beginning, the president tends to nationalisms, but then in the last period of his administration, he was more close to communism's group. So if you, we also noted that nationalism's group, it doesn't mean that they are not religious people. Most of them are Muslim, and they were pious and also religious persons. So, but related to religions and the state, they choose nationalism because of the condition of Indonesia as pluralistic country. Then the other issue that we have to discuss also in the old order is that the establishment of religious affairs departments. But now it changed. I think it started 2010. The name is changed to be the Ministry of Religious Affairs. So the establishment of religious affairs really related to the limitation of Muslim power, and also it can be considered as compromise of between Islamic oriented group and nationalist oriented group. So this is like compromise and make it the power of Muslim at that times just on this department. And then by establish these departments also, the government has possibility to interfere on religious affairs in society. So in Islam, in the old order also, the government forms religious organizations. So we can say that each of the religion has their own religious organization which were established by the governments. Therefore, this organization is really close to Islam, to Indonesian government. If you look at that, during the old order, the Department of Religious Affairs was functioned as supporting the governmental policies of religious issue. So the governments can control these departments to make them support governments to agree with the government's policy. Therefore, from this department, the government control Muslim power because they can control the Department of Religious Affairs. Even the government appointed nationalist figures as the minister of this department instead of religious figures. I think Islamic-oriented group really wants that who becomes the minister is from religious figures. But the government do not want to do that, just appointed nationalist figures. And then there is one issue also that we have to mention when we're talking about Islams in Indonesia in the old orders. That is about blasphemy law. So this blasphemy law is really related until now. So some of the groups, especially if related to religious minority, they use blasphemy law because this law actually there is certain problems, and then in 2010, actually, there is a judicial review for that, but it is decided that this law is still needed by Indonesia. So it's still, until now, we have this law for like maintaining religious relations between community. So why this blasphemy law issued by the governments? So at that time, there is a tension between Islamic-oriented group, especially Nahdlatul Ulama, and communism's group. So at that time, communism group make it such kind of activities that is also similar with the Nahdlatul Ulama's activities at the grassroots. So Nahdlatul Ulama was really worried about that, and then the Nahdlatul Ulama figures then pushed the presidents to issue the blasphemy law at that times. And then the presidents agree with that and then issue law number 1 PNPS 1965. So what is the blasphemy law is about? So blasphemy law mentions, actually in Article 1, mention every person is prohibited from intentionally in public to recommend and strive for public support to conduct an interpretation on religions that is adhered to in Indonesia or to perform religious activities that resembles religious activities from the central doctrine of religions. So based on this law, then there are so many actions doing by what we call it conservative groups to religious minority. So some of the case, for example, in a society there is Ahmadiyah and also Syiah. If there is a certain activities, then they can conclude as the blasphemy religion. For example, we will give examples later about blasphemy law, because there is events where the blasphemy law is used by certain peoples to maintain their own groups. So for many experts, for this law actually leads to how the mainstream, what we call as mainstream in Indonesia, to maintain their own power. So actually we do not know who call as mainstream, but usually when people use this this law, usually they mentions that group, the other group is not mainstream and they are deviant groups. So many cases then occurs because of this law is permitted to make them to go to the jail. So that's some issue in the old order. Actually, there's the other issue related to Islam's in the old order, but I think we can put it just on a certain topic of that, and we move to Islam in the new order. So if in the old order, the governments try to limit the Muslim powers, then in the new order, the government make it uniformity and also central control. It's not limited anymore, but really limited. So maybe we can say that there is no power for Muslims groups at that times in the new orders. We can see it start from in 1973, for example, the government state that political parties were simplified. So all Islamic parties were merged into the United Development Party. So if before 1973, we can find several parties, Islamic parties, but start with the 1973, it's only one party that that member from the other Islamic parties. And then in 1980, the government initiated Pancasila as the sole principles of organization, including Islamic parties. So the organization or parties cannot mention that Islam as their principle of organization or parties. So they have to put Pancasila as the principles. Because of this, PPP had lost its Muslim constituents. And also because Nahdlatul Ulama left this party, and the government parties, that is Golongan Karya, received an increase in the Muslim vote. So the government's really successful in make it their power more. They get more power than before. They are really majority in the parties. It's almost 70% usually go to Golongan Karya. Okay, then in addition to sacredness of Pancasila, the new order provide new slogan. If in the old order we have a slogan Nasakom, then in the new order we got a slogan Sara. It means suku, agama, ras, dan antar golongan. It means tribe, religions, race, and intergroups. The new order governments did not allow people to speak freely on the matter of Sara because it was considered as an embryo of separatisms. So in the new order, we are really careful when we talking about religions because we are afraid that it's a part of a Sara issue. Because of that, we think that tolerance that happens in a new order is really tolerance, but actually it's like service of the tolerance, but deep on that there are so many conflict, and that can come up every times. So this is why then in the new order we really stop talking about religion with the other peoples or talking about ethnicity with the other peoples. I think there's one issue that we need to discuss also. There is a slogan like this: Islam yes, Partai Islam no. It means Islam yes, Islamic Party no. So these slogans actually mentioned by Nur Khalis Majid at that times. We call Cak Nur. Actually, he mentions that in the speech at the Halal Bihalal. Halal Bihalal event is the event after Eid Fitri. So in that speech, he mentions that Islam yes, Partai Islam no. Islam yes, Islamic Party no. So it's about 1970 when he mentions about that. At that time, Nur Khalis Majid is the chairman of the Islamic Student Association Board of Directors. Therefore, these speeches actually mentioned in that event and also in front of Islamic Youth Movement, the Islamic Student Association, and Indonesian Islamic Students. So these this statement is really becomes most controversial idea. And until now, actually, some persons also still talking about this and thinks that this is still relevant with the reforms era. And Cak Nur actually is very smart person, and then you can see here there are so many books mentioned about or talking about Islam and humanity, Islam as openness, religions, and also talking about fiqh of interreligions, and also about Islam's and civilizations. And mentions about there is no Islamic State, for example. This book is very famous books, and then he is very influenced persons. But there's so many rejections actually to him, especially with these statements. So some of the conservative groups mentions that he is deviant and he is not Muslim anymore. And even one, I really remember at the times there is statements that his blood is what we call it halal, is permitted to kill him, for example. So there's so many controversial idea actually that offered by Nurcholish Madjid, and especially for his concept of pluralisms, considered by several groups as deviations of texts of the Quran and Sunnah. So it means that he is not Muslim anymore. So this is very controversial issue at that times. But we can say that these statements in 1917 is very strong statements, because at the times people is really still struggling how to make it Islam's becomes foundation of Indonesia. So that's some issue in the new order. But I think I want to also give one issue in the 1982. It's about school uniforms. So in 1982, the government issued a school uniform regulation for kindergartens to high school. So you can see in the right pictures, this is for senior high school. So there are several clothes. Then this is that if you go to the school, you have to dress like this. And then there's also in the left, very left, there is a student who used like, it's not veils but cover her head, but it's not a part of religious clothes. It's a part of they mentions that unique clothes, so it's not religious. So at that times, many students were expelled from school for violating the rules regarding school uniforms. So they regard that they doing violating the rules. And also there is issue about posthumous hijab. So I remember, I'm thinking I'm still at elementary school at that times. So I also hear about this posthumous hijab. So there was a woman wearing hijab and then spread poison in the market. We are very afraid at that times, because it mentioned in the news mentions that these women hide the vibes inside the hijabs and then give a spread poisons to the market, to the vegetables, to the fish, and others materials in the markets. So it's very strong issue at that times. This also conclude that or describe that the government was still allergic to Islamic symbols, because they think that if they gave the permissions to these symbols to come up in a public area, it means that the resurgence of the Muslim groups' power will come up. So they are afraid that Muslim will get more and more power in a politics or in a society. So they're still allergic with the Islamic symbols. But then the dynamic of politics happens. So there was a new balance and lead President Suharto to be more familiar with Muslims. So we can say that in the new orders at the time, in the last periods, the presidents went to Hajj and then doing some symbolic Islam's rituals also. So it's like the presidents become more support to Islamic group. But of course, because of there is a changing, actually, how he observed that there is a changing powers, that the powers now comes to Muslim groups. Therefore, he comes to a Muslims group. Because of that, in 1991, then the government issued a decree to allow students to wear hijab. So this is the issue in the new orders. So we can come to the present. Now we are in the reform era. So how is Islam in the reforms era, especially Muslim? How? They are really trying other ways. This is still in the politics perspective. So Muslim aspiration. If you look at in 1950, for example, Muslim aspiration is more philosophical. So Muslim groups more focus on Islamic State with Sharia in the constitutions. They're focused on that, and the political parties that support this is Islamist. It means that they become Islamic parties. So the political agenda of this Islamic party is Islamic State with Sharia in the constitutions. This is about a discourse about its 1950. But then the changing in the Reformation era, we can see here, post-1998, Muslim aspiration it's still in philosophical but also in pragmatic. They're not only focus on philosophical issue but also doing pragmatic action. So in political agenda, they are still try to make it Sharia in the constitutions, Indonesian constitutions, and then Islamic moral values in the state policies. Then also the political agenda is development of Muslim society. Then we can see the sieve of that also in the political parties. The political parties who have this such kind of agenda, it's not only Islamists or Islamic parties, but we can see there are Islamists, Islam inclusive, secular inclusive. So there are national parties, but they are really Islam-friendly parties. So right now, for example, we can see that some province in Indonesia, they have Sharia law as a Sharia regional regulations. They have it. For example, in Aceh, in Bulukumba, in Tasikmalaya, in West Java, in some regions in West Java, and also in other places. So the focus is like, it's not only related to the practice of Islam in terms of rituals like Salah, Zakah, and Hajj, but they also try to have the regulations about how women dress, especially in Aceh. So how women have to dress and how women have to have muhrim to when they went outside, for example. This is how the Sharia in the constitution in certain area is permitted. Because also there is decentralizations in Indonesia, so each of province try to find their specific characters, and then some regions mentions that our characters, our identity is Islam's, then there is the right to implement Sharia in the regional regulations. So this is such kind of the one ways from Islamic groups. But what we have to know is that it's not only Islamists. So you can find that it's not Islamic parties who it's not only Islamic parties who propose Sharia in regional regulations. So, for example, Golkar, Golongan Karya, also proposed that. They, in the campaigns, they promise to the society that our region will be implement Sharia law. Because of that, some constituents not only vote for Islamic parties, they also go to national parties because they know that national parties also have Islamic agenda. So at that times, we can say that these parties are Islam-friendly parties, but actually it's really related to how to get it voters from the society. So that's the issue of the Sharia law. And then there is also issue related to blasphemy. This is what I said before in the beginning, that we have a case about blasphemy. So it was Basuki Cahayapurnama. At that time, he became a governor in Jakarta because of Jokowi became president. Then Basuki Cahayapurnama became the governor of Jakarta. And then after that, he wants to be candidate for the governors in Jakarta. But in one speech, he mentioned like this: in your inner heart, ladies and gentlemen, you may feel you cannot vote for me because you have been lied to by the use of Surah Al-Maidah. Because of these statements, there were many actions to him from Islamic groups. So for them, for Islamic group, this is a blasphemy. It means that Ahok, we call Ahok, Ahok doing blasphemy to Islam. Therefore, there is some actions. You can see in the pictures that they doing what they call as Islam defending actions. And it's not only one times but several times. You can see here the pictures. There were so many Muslims at that time go to Jakarta to support the governments to make Ahok to be jailed. So the coordinator of this movement is the national movement to safeguard fatwa of the ulamas, and then Islamic Defender Front, and then Islamic Ummah Forum. So this group are famous in a conservative group. And this is the coordinators. But the members who comes to this movement, there are many. Even from the mainstream group, for example, they think that they have to go to the street to make Ahok to go to jail because of the blasphemy. So you can also, for example, the members from Muhammadiyah or maybe from Nahdlatul Ulama who came this, although actually Muhammadiyah is it's not forbidden, but mentions that Muhammadiyah was not support that actions because it's Muhammadiyah is not street actions, and this is not characters of Muhammadiyah movements. So if there are Muhammadiyah member go to these actions, it means that it's the individual spirit. It's not Muhammadiyah spirits. So this action, there were so many people here. We can see that several actions conducted by them. For example, in 14th October 2016, and then 4 November, 2 December, 11 February. I'm sorry, it's still in Indonesian. December, February. This is Indonesian over for a month, yeah. So this is to December, 11 February, and then 21 February, 31 March, and then 5 of May, 1917. And finally, they were successful in this movement. In May 9th, the North Jakarta District Court ruled Ahok was jailed for 2 years since he was proved doing blasphemy. So how about Muhammadiyah and Nahdlatul Ulama? I think you have know about these biggest organizations in Islam's organizations in Indonesia. Before Indonesian independence, Muhammadiyah was established, and then Nahdlatul Ulama also several years after that. There's two issues for these organizations. Nahdlatul Ulama developed the terms Islam Nusantara. And what is Islam Nusantara? They said that Islam Nusantara is empirical and distinctive Islam as a result of interaction, contextualizations, and indigenizations. So Islam Nusantara exists because of there's interactions in Indonesian society. There's a contextualizations to the situations and environments in Indonesia, and also indigenizations. So therefore, they call Islam Nusantara. And this slogan, got many rejection from the other group, especially conservative group. They mentions that there is no Islam Nusantara. Islam is one. If you mention Islam Nusantara, it means that you are not Islam anymore, because Islam is one, and then there is no Islam Nusantara. A little bit different with the Nahdlatul Ulama. Muhammadiyah is more focused on the characters of the movement. The statement is moderate progressive movement. They always say that Muhammadiyah is progressive movement. We are moderates. If there is a member who's still conservative, they are actually not have a spirit of the movement. So the spirit for the Muhammadiyah is progressive movement, moderate. What is the meaning of moderate progressive movement? It means that Muhammadiyah invites Muslims to prioritize moderate diversity and be progressive to create ultimate civilization for all human beings. Because actually Islam is rahmatan alamin. Islam is for all of human beings. Islam is blessing for all human beings. So we have to be progressive, and we have to be moderate in the interactions among religious followers to make it ultimate civilization, to make it a very good civilization and society, because Islam is not only for Muslim, but Islam for all of human beings in the world. So this is Muhammadiyah characteristic. And after the case of Ahok, the blasphemy, Ahmad Shafi'i Ma'arif, the leader of Muhammadiyah in 1998 or 2005, he really mentions that Ahok is not a bad person. Because of several statements from him, some member of the Muhammadiyah mentions that Ahmad Shafi'i Ma'arif is not our buya, it's not our religious leaders anymore, because he protect Ahok. But actually Ahmad Shafi'i Ma'arif is not in terms of protect Ahok, but in terms of to look at the statements more carefully about the statements of Ahok. It's not about that Al-Ma'idah is lie, but it's about people who use that surah to get voters. So Ahmad Shafi'i Ma'arif also state that Islam, genuine Islams. This is also response to such kind of the street actions, because some violence also happen in the street actions. He mentions that reminds Muslim, genuine Islam is polite Islam, gentle Islam, friendly Islam, and Islam is full of blessing. A tolerant Islam, and Islam accommodate local culture, and Islam does not force, not doing force to the other followers, for example. And now we have Haidar Nasir. Now he is the leader of Muhammadiyah until now. He also emphasized about moderate characteristic of Muhammadiyah. Indonesian Islam has a moderate characters and is anti all forms of radicalism and terrorism. So these statements actually really strong to counter violence phase of the Islam that is shown by the other groups that they use violence, for example, to get their goal. So Haidar Nasir and Ahmad Shafi'i Ma'arif reminds what is actually genuine Islam. And this is I'm so sorry. Okay, so this is the leaders of Nahdlatul Ulama. He also mentions that those who want an Islamic state are those who do not understand Indonesian history. So if we really know about Indonesian history, we have determined that the foundation of Islam, the foundation of Indonesia is not Islam. The foundation is Indonesia is Pancasila. So we are not Islamic state. We are not Islamic country, although we are a religious country. But we are not. But Indonesia is not Muslim is not the only community who belongs to Indonesia. This is Kiai Haji Maimun mentions about that. So I think this is actually there's so many issues in if we look at Islam's and society, Islam's and governments, Islam and politics. I only put it several topics that is becomes the maybe points that we can start to understand Islam's and Islam in Indonesia, especially from political perspective. So I really hope that this talking or this meeting can give you good aspirations or good understanding about Islam's Indonesia, or you have a good or you have a new horizons about Islam's in Indonesia, because I believe that before this meeting you have got lecturing from the other lecturers who talking about Islam's also. Maybe some of these are repetitions, but I really hope that you get something new. So I think that is enough for these meetings, and thank you for your attention. In Indonesia we call terima kasih for thank you. So terima kasih for all of the intentions, and I really hope that you really understand for these introductions to Islam in Indonesia in a political perspective. Good morning and Assalamualaikum.